All right, well then we'll get going. Let's get this week 4 of Marche Madness underway. We'll always start with a little bit of a cheers to everybody, to a family gathering weekend, to all the hope in the air, to all the delicious wine and all the stuff that we've, all the subjects that we've covered, and all the celebrations that we can all look forward to, and as spring has sprung, and we can really enjoy moments like this, and maybe we can even taste wine in person with one another instead of on Zoom. Although, you know, this is we're getting used to this, that's for sure. Cheers to everybody. Salud. All right, we'll get started by going into sort of a little bit of a recap of where we are and how we got here. Let me share the screen real quick, and we'll go to the map. Here's the map of everything we've covered. So if we zoom out a little bit, ooh, that's a lot, and see the boot of Italy, you'll see what, you know, remind you of kind of where we're talking about, where in the Adriatic Sea we're talking about. This region, of course, the Marche, and we've covered all of these wines up until now. Now the last 3 wines that we're covering is those 3 red ones right in a row. So probably out of all the ones that we've done, the closest of the 3 together, similar terroirs, similar soils, right up in the hills as you're coming out of the Apennine Mountains here. So you have down closer to the town of Jesi, and sort of the central area of where not only Rosso Piceno, which is the wine that we'll cover, but also the heart of the Verdicchio country there. This will be the red wine, the Fattoria San Lorenzo, who makes some outstanding Verdicchios, and we'll talk about that later. And then the white wine that we'll start with today, that's this one here. That's the Andrea Felici. And this is their cru wine. But if you remember, we talked about the what they're calling the Grand Cru soils for Marche. Last week we did the La Distesa Verdicchio, and this is, you know, not far from there as well. Also in the Grand Cru soils is the Andrea Felici. And then the last wine we'll do tonight is this last one down here, and that's the Quacquarini Vernaccia di Serra Petrona, and that's a very, very unique wine, kind of one of a kind, a very interesting style wine, but also an interesting grape variety, and a not traditional style of what they normally make down there. And we'll cover that in a little bit. But again, so this is the map that we've been looking at, and a real sense of how the Marche is laid out. You've got the Apennine Mountains again that go right down the sort of center of Italy. This is the region of Umbria here, which is one of the few landlocked regions that doesn't have any coastline. Then, of course, you have Tuscany over here, one of the more famous regions. And, you know, the east coast of Italy is really a fascinating area because it is kind of separated off by these mountains. So when people go travel to Italy, they tend to stay on this side. They'll go to Tuscany, they'll go north up to Piedmont, and not too many people make it over to the east side, which to me is some of my favorite area. You know, there's the very oddball landlocked country of San Marino. If you didn't know that, that's actually a country in and of itself. It's a fascinating little mountain village, if you will, but it's an entire country. And then as you get south of there, Urbino is a very similar sort of city. And then this whole area here is they kind of designate the different regions within Marche as 14 different hilltop castles. So one of the more prominent ones is Castello di Jesi, which is again sort of the central area of where Verdicchio is grown. And so we'll get right to that, and we'll get into Andrea Felici. Make sure there's nobody else in the tasting room, or the tasting room, the waiting room, and oh, this is another.
Hey, Kevin, sorry we're a little late. It's Andrea and Steve and Morgan and Polly. We're here.
No worries. I'm glad you guys are all together. That's fun.
Yeah.
It's good to see you.
I don't know who that is. He doesn't have a beard.
I know. I don't understand this person.
Substitute referee tonight.
You had that ready.
Everyone else has heard it before. You guys got here. I'm using
so
old jokes already. And just to let you guys know, that big red table in the corner there, that is that big group is my entire family, and we're all cheering for you to win, because if you win, then you get the tasting with my mom as you requested a couple of weeks ago. So
Excellent.
It's mandatory.
yeah, absolutely. So I wanted to show you another map real quick. Besides the map that shows you sort of the geographical area, this is the. Let me see that again. This is the map of the actual DOCs and the DOCGs of Marche. It's a really good updated map. It's really hard always to find maps of sort of what's going on in the region that tells you exactly, where the designated areas are. And I'll run you through it real quick before we get started. Up here in the Bianchello di Maturo, if you remember the Bianchello that we had, that coastal wine, this is that region there. It's actually a fairly big region for Bianchello, but it's all along right around the Matauro River. And again, sort of an up and coming grape, as we discussed a couple of weeks ago. In the first week, the Villa Ligi, the Aleatico di Pergola, that's up here in the mountains. Again, a fairly not a small growing region, but a pretty limited one, and not too many people making wine up there, but it's up and coming. This big yellow area here is what we've been talking about today, the Castello di Jesi, which is where the Verdicchio, the main area for Verdicchio, and then up here, the smaller appellation up in the mountains, that's Verdicchio di Metallica. Conero is that the red wine region, mostly within a national park, as I said, that coastal region there, with all limestone, where they grow almost entirely Montepulciano. Down here in the purple, that's Vernaccia di Serra Petrona, which is I think the smallest appellation in Marche, a really unique area, and some unique wines out of there. Lacrima d'Amore d'Alba up here, I almost skipped by. Well, that whole coastal area connected to Castello di Jesi for Verdicchio. And down here, Fermo, this is where Porto San Giorgio, a lot of these coastal towns, is where grapes like Pecorino in the first week that we had, that really delicious Pecorino is from that area. We did not cover anything from Offida, which is a shame. Offida down here in the south has become a really, really important area for an important DOCG for Marche. Not for any other reason. I tasted a number of wines, and it just comes together on what wines seem to work for the tasting. There were a couple of wines that I like that maybe just weren't showing well, so I decided not to use them. But Offida is a really, really important area that's up and coming for Pecorino, especially for Montepulciano. A lot of good local blends down there, and you have the one of my favorite cities to visit in Marche down here, right on the corner here. Rosso Piceno is a beautiful, beautiful city to go and visit, but no wines from Offida this time, which was definitely the first time for all of our Marche Madnesses. This is the year number 7, I think. We always have a representation from Offida, but instead this year we did just from Valerio. So that's an interesting map to take a look at. And then lastly, before we get into underway, just to remind you how the sheets go. Hopefully you guys have been kind of filling in as you go. We're down to the very last portions to fill in. Oh, wait. This is paused. Apologies. There, you can see that, right? The brackets. So just to remind you about the brackets and on how it works, we'd love to have your brackets, please, before Monday, just so we can decide the winner and who gets the tasting. We get to share sort of the results. I know a lot of people have asked, what actually is the winning bracket. The whole idea is that we take all the brackets that you guys have filled out, and we get sort of a conglomerative mean, if you will, come up with the average. And each time a wine moves on from one spot to the next, like, if this becomes the Colle Stefano, then then every time somebody votes for that to get to that point, then it gets points. And the same thing, more points as it goes on until a winner is decided. And it was really fun. I had 2 of my peers in the industry and 2 absolute lovers of the Marche region, and people who I very highly respect their opinion, Ian D'Agata and Shelley Lindgren, fill out brackets this week, and I'll have to share those with you later. But those not that their opinion should sway any of your opinions, just because they're awesome, rad experts. But they will definitely. They had a good time filling out the brackets and wish they could be a part of this. So. It's really a cool thing, and it was interesting to see what they decided is ends up being the winner for sure. There's always surprises. That's what makes this as fun. Okay, so let's finally get into the first wine and our last Verdicchio out of all of them. Craig, sorry, you're gonna have to play along, fake it if you can. But this Verdicchio is we did a very typical example of Verdicchio di Metallica with the Colle Stefano, and then we did an atypical version with the La Distesa, which it was really the point of conversation last week, and I'm glad that we had such a good conversation, was that real difference between a more natural wine with a little bit of funk and a little bit of earth and a little bit of, sort of extra tertiary notes in the wine versus something as clean and precise as the Verdicchio di Metallica that we had from Colle Stefano. This is going to be sort of kind of in between those. It's going to have a lot more viscosity. It's a lot more fruit forward. It's a lot more kind of round and rich. Still has that nice textural component to it. Still has a ton of minerality. Again, as we talked about the Grand Cru soils, these are very mineral rich soils and not as difficult as the typical clay soils that populate most of the Marche. This area is much more decomposed limestone, calcareous soils, and really makes for a dynamic white. This is a single vineyard selection, the Cantico del Figura, and this is a wine where they do about, let me see, I think it's 12 hours of skin contact. I'm sorry, 2 days skin contact at the very beginning of fermentation. They ferment this in not in concrete, it's concrete, and they'll leave this on the lees for a year, so it does have some texture to it, but there's no oak aging. It's not stainless, so it's not super linear and steely. It does have some really nice texture to it. So it's a wine where they play with it just a little bit, just to get sort of a little bit more of a rich and a bigger sort of exposure a little bit to the wine, and I think the result is outstanding. There are sort of people's Grand Crus or the Reserva level Verdicchios in this area. A lot of them have moved to playing around with more oak, with fermentation in oak barrels, or at least aging it with oak barrels, a little bit of both. And Verdicchio as a grape variety can really stand up to that quite well. A lot of the comparisons as this region starts to become or come into its own as a top white wine region in Italy and in Europe in general, a lot of the comparisons to Verdicchio is that it kind of has a lot of similarities to Chablis. So it's not completely out there that they'd be using a little bit more oak, where they're going to be, kind of showcasing a little bit more of the versatility of the wine, the ageability of the wine as well. But a wine like this that doesn't see any oak still has unbelievable age worthiness. They really refer to Verdicchio as a white grape that has a lot of components of red wine, not only on the textural side of things. It does have, pretty strong phenolics. It's got a lot of kind of texture to it, but the age worthiness and the chemical compounds of it makes it a really complex white grape variety beyond most of the others, in not only in this area, but when you compare it to a lot of white grape varieties in all of Europe, actually. Anybody have thoughts on this? Does it jump out of the glass for you? Do we love it?
Hey, Kevin, quick question. When people are doing it in oak, is it having more like similarities to maybe Chardonnay or maybe like a Pinot Gris with a touch of oak on it? Not all of them are going to be in that kind of more richer, reductive style of the second wine that we had last night, or last tasting.
Last night. I know, it all bleeds together.
Yeah, right. Or do you expand a little bit on like the modern producers using some oak and maybe what those wines would be like comparatively?
Yeah, absolutely. I chose not to use those. One, because I'll definitely, admit, and those of you who know my palate, I don't necessarily care for too much oak on wines, and I prefer wines that are a little bit more transparent with their flavor and not flavored with oak. My very favorite Marche producer, Verdicchio producer, one of my favorite wines from him is a really, really exotic and bigger wine. And I asked him about, the years in which he uses oak, and he just looks at me in this very deadpan face and says, oak is a spice. And in the years that everything goes perfectly and my fruit is perfect, then I don't need to add any spice to my meal. I don't need to, add anything to what the terroir and what the vintage has created. And so, his wines are stunning. There's another producer that we've not touched on, which is actually one of the more, sort of heralded producers in this area in Jesi, is Villabucci. Emidio Bucci is one of the first sort of Verdicchio Reservas that was, put on the stage, for Tre Bicchieri and Vinitaly, and always heralded as one of the best wines. But it's a barrel aged wine, very similar to something like a Chardonnay, and it's gorgeous and it's age worthy and fantastic. So the similarity to Chardonnay is very on par. It's you won't find anything too overly done. I've never had anything that's overly modern. They still tend to be a little bit judicious with the use of oak. They're not pushing the envelope like a California Chardonnays. They're definitely much more akin to something like Chablis and white Burgundies. But the grape variety can really stand up to that, and it absorbs the wood flavors very well and mingles with it quite well, as opposed to it kind of being disjointed, which a lot of Italian white grapes tend to be pretty disjointed when you throw some oak on there and give it 100% mallow, like you would in a more modern wine. A lot of those grapes just don't lend well to that. They just all of a sudden get very flabby. They don't retain acidity, where Verdicchio retains acidity through any sort of treatment. That acid is still going to be there. That length is still going to be there. That character, that mineral character from the soils is still going to be there, even if you're treating it much more in a modern way. The fun thing about it is that it is completely versatile, and you can have clean, crisp, straightforward wines like the Colle Stefano we had from Metallica. But even up in Metallica, there's a few producers that do oak-aged Verdicchio and do it quite well. La Monachesca is a producer that comes to mind. They do a wine called Mirum, which is their Reserva, and it's stunning, and it ages super well. I had one recently that was a 2012, and it was, absolutely young and fresh. And again, it's tasted very Burgundian for sure.
So Kevin, in our house, I think it's we all like it. I think it's really quite good. The Colle Stefano is still winning because it's just so clean. Some of the fruit forward nature of this one's a little bit harder to love for me. So
go ahead. It lasts forever on the palate. The finish is like it's gonna be like 30 minutes. I'll still taste this one.
Yeah, it's a long finish.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. No, it's got some legs to it. It goes on for a long time, and that's why I think, again, it still has that freshness to it. It's not as, again, straightforward and just as clean and crisp as Stefano. The precision on Stefano is great. This wine is more about the exotic nature of it, the long finish, the much wider palate. When we talked a couple weeks ago about when you talk about how it exists on your palate, on whether or not it has a shape on from front to back tasting. This one is just kind of just spreads out wide and just stays wide the entire time. But it does have some frame, it does have acidity, it does have texture, and it has that nice minerality to it, but it doesn't clean up, zip up tight like the Metallica one does. Go ahead, Steve. I'm sorry, you were going to say something.
Oh no, it's fine. It was almost non-wine related. I apologize. We were running a tiny bit late, and you may have already covered this, but you look a lot younger. I was just curious if you had some work done. You've done this.
Oh, thank you. Yes, I had some work done with a pair of clippers and a lot of screams, where Sarah had to knock on the bathroom door like, "You okay in there?"
Looking good, sir.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it. It came down, and usually I break when I get that ugly. I break it down in stages and get really weird with it. This was one where it just had to all go in one fell swoop. So
yeah, you did go from 0 to 100, or
Yeah,
less
yeah.
than.
Normally I have some sort of weird creative,
Oh, yeah.
versions in between, but this time it felt really
Yeah.
good to take it all down.
Steven goes to the mustache just to make me mad. I understand.
We're all doing certain things to leave the last year behind us, and that was me. It was like, all right, let's get it done.
Nice. All right. Anyway,
Okay,
back to the wine.
I'm glad.
Did Felix recognize you?
What's that?
When you finished, did Felix recognize you?
So in the last couple of days, the funny thing is that it happened, even though it happened very quickly, it did kind of happen in 3 stages. And the last one today, because I got my hair cut, he stopped at the top of the stairs and he just looks at me and he just kind of laughs and kind of runs the other way. He's like, I don't know what to expect out of daddy at this point. Any other notes on the Verdicchio? I mean, again, this wine. Yeah, go ahead.
I find that I am sitting here drinking it, not tasting it, which is probably a very good thing.
Yeah.
Or a bad thing, considering I've got 2 more to go. But it goes really nice with Highway 1 and a lovely Irish cheddar. So this is dinner.
Nice, that's great. I love it.
This is very drinkable to me, and I enjoy it. And there's something in the background that I like, and I don't know whether it's a little honeysuckle, maybe even a little, I don't know, maybe a little fennel on the nose too. But it's very way in the background.
Yeah, no, I think that's accurate for sure. It's a complex wine, and there are layers to it. So it's I'm trying to look up my notes real quick on this wine. And it's funny because we talked about that one time where I think it was last week, when we were talking about Verdicchio, is that there's a little bit of a canned corn aspect to it. And this one, when I first opened it up, it has like almost like a puffed corn, and like it's got Maracona almonds. But I did say, white pepper, celery salt, similar to some of the really, really good Gruner Veltliners out there. It does have, that sort of backbone. But I think that with Verdicchio, you always go in that world of nectarines, the world of like mandarin oranges. This I had said, mandarin marmalade. But it is a very, it's a long palette, as you guys said. And remember, this is 2017. So, when it comes to kind of tracking vintages, of course, the Colle Stefano, that was a 2019. It was fresh and clean as can be. And their 2020 will be probably arriving in California, this month. So they sell their wine out quickly, and it's meant to be drunk young, where this wine 2017 is current vintage, and this isn't going anywhere. This this can be drank in another 7 years, and it's going to be fantastic. So it is really interesting to try wine like this, that has that sort of longevity and that sort of ability to age and that sort of link to it. And it's going to stay fresh, but at the same time, it's going to get more and more tertiary notes, more and more complexity.
So it's also a screw cap, so it's going to freaking stay kind of the way it is for quite some time.
Yeah, it's tight. There's no exchange of oxygen in this wine. There's no question. It's going to be hampered down, which on wines like this, I think screw cap is a great thing. I think it totally works. But there's no exchange of oxygen, and I think that's a benefit for this wine. I agree, Pedro, for sure. It's a tough one, though. It's funny. I mean, again, as we talk about the versatility of Verdicchio, 3 very different wines compared to the 2 that we tried last week, right? I mean, this is extreme, a little bit more giving, much more voluptuous, a little bit more tropical compared to the Colle Stefano. Very different texturally to the La Distesa. And, as we pointed out, it is, in a perfect world, I'd love to try these 3 next to each other. But the whole idea of how we tasted these, we wanted to make it a little bit more dynamic week to week. But yes, trying these 3 side by side would also be a very different experience. So you kind of have to remember what you liked and what you experienced from those 2 other wines, and then carry it over to this. but I love this wine. I think it's a really special version of Verdicchio, and again, it shows the flair of the grape variety. It shows the flair of the producer, and this is an organic producer, a small family producer that focuses on Verdicchio. I mean, they have a little bit of other grapes, but this is their bread and butter. And as a family, they've done an amazing job bringing forward Verdicchio, you know, on the world stage as being, you know, one of the great grape varieties to be reckoned with, and they're always at the top of people's lists as far as their production. Again, we're talking, you know, super small production. You can see on the bottle, you know, they number the bottles. It does. I forget what the production is for this every year. It's very, very small. It's less than 5,000 bottles, so it's a real treat to be able to
Kevin,
try wines like this.
It says on it, ours says 3852 of 6,300.
Of 6,300 this year, yeah, and that's high for them. So 2017, 2016 were both big years. So yeah, 6,300. Oh yeah, I didn't even see that. That's of 63. Yeah. Yeah, I mean that's how much of this wine they make. It's a real treat to be able to have it. It's pretty special. This is one that I try and squirrel away in my cellar, and then I always inevitably drink it before I actually get around to aging it. But I try every time.
So this is a wine that when we were in the Marche, actually, we were at a tiny little inn, and the restaurant owner brought it to us, and he was like, "This is the best wine in all of Italy. You need to drink this."
Yeah.
And so, and it was not this vintage, obviously, but it was like, and it was very, very good. It was a fish-based restaurant, in the Marche. It was amazing. So
right.
Yeah.
No, and you know, this is you know, has a lot of oil to it, a lot of that kind of richness, almost like an olive oily texture to it, which I mean with seafood, with richer seafoods, this wine just goes absolutely dynamite. So it does need to be said that is definitely, you know, the right pairing with a wine like this, even though it can stand up to all kinds of other things, but with some really fresh seafood, this wine will you know, blow the doors off for sure. But yeah, it's fun going to restaurants in the Marche and digging through their Verdicchio list, and you know, if they pin you as a tourist, they'll say, oh well, here's this, it's a certain thing, and then you start looking and you're like, oh wait, I want to spend more, and I want something that's, you know, 10 years old, and they're like, oh okay, let me show you something, you know, it's very different. So, you know, because fair enough, they don't, you know, they don't get an insane amount of tourism like the rest of Italy. So when they have guests there, they're really excited to show you what the Marche, what the potential is, especially they can't be more proud of the Verdicchio grape, because, you know, for the right reason, because the Verdicchio deserves that. And it's really fun to see even these small restaurants, not even just the Michelin star restaurants, even these small, amazing restaurants will have this kind of small reserve list of back vintage Verdicchios that you could dig into. And it's just mind blowing, and it, you know, ridiculously inexpensive to find a bottle like this that's, you know, maybe from you know, 12 years ago, and they are so excited to share it with you. So that's a good point. All right, any other thoughts on this before we move on to red wine? Are we ready for red wine? All right. This is a funny one because it was really hard to decide which wine to go to first. And so far in this whole tasting, it's been pretty mapped out. For me, it's been pretty mapped out fairly well as far as which wines, you know, to taste first, you know, but it's always interesting when you have to kind of figure out, like, well, I'm not sure which one tastes better. So I've decided between the two that we're going to go with the Alberto Quacquarini first. And that's mainly because of the aromatics. So that's the Serra Patrona. That's this wine here. The orange cap and sort of very, very old school rustic label, the one without the Easter bunny on it. You know, again, because this is a little bit more of an outlier, let me share the screen again, and we'll go to my photos. Where'd my photos go? There we go. So, oh, that's not full screen. There we go. So this is, I just to go back, this is a picture at the Il Cantico di Figura vineyard at Andrea Felici. This is that specific vineyard. which is really interesting when you look at these vines. They're really sort of wild looking, huge canes. They do some really interesting, they do a lot of different experimental farming. And this is a view from down the hill to Andrea Felice as well. And there are the Verdicchio bins. And just to remind you, this is a picture I took. This is really kind of gives you an idea of the layers of how Marche is set out. You have the mountains in the background, and then literally Marche is made up, as I said, of 14 different castle villages, ancient castle villages on top of hills. So if you're in one area, you can see the castle village, although it's kind of like Lord of the Rings, where you have like you light the fire, and then the next village can then see it. And sorry, these are pictures from the last winery. Okay, so this is the tiny little village of Serra Patrona. This is down in the south, and tucked way into the mountains. And this is it. That's Serra Patrona right there. It's a neat little mountain village, way inland, right as you get to the Apennine foothills. And it's a beautiful, just unbelievable, picturesque little town, as you can see. That's the extent of it, and that's the boundaries of it, kind of tucked in there. And what's interesting about this winery specifically is they do a ripasso system for their wines. Now, they do still wines with ripasso, but Vernaccia di Serra Patrona is a difficult name to understand, because Vernaccia kind of is a name for a lot of different things. Sorry. But Vernaccia di Serra Patrona is specifically, sorry about that, is specifically a sparkling red, similar to like a Lambrusco. And they do it in a very, very unique style. And there's only a few producers in this tiny little appellation that they dry their grapes similar to ripasso. So they'll harvest them and then dry them in this system here, to raisin them, basically to concentrate all the sugars in them. Some of you know what ripasso is, some of you don't. So I'll just go over it real quick. And the idea of ripasso is they sweeten up that wine, and they'll use it in what is sort of a secondary fermentation. So they'll harvest grapes and start fermenting. So take a bunch of red grapes, put them in a fermenter, and let them start the process. And then they'll take the rest of their harvest and dry the grapes, and then later add that in. So as a red sparkling wine, which is their dominant, most of their production is, the Vernaccia di Serra Patrona DOCG is a red sparkling wine, much like Lambrusco, but it's a really unique one because it goes through 3 different fermentations, which is that doesn't happen anywhere else really in the wine world. It goes through primary fermentation as the red grapes. They then add the sweet must, so all of those raisins, into that fermentation, adding to the yeast and then fermenting again. And then what they'll do next is bottle it and do the 3rd fermentation like you would champagne in bottle. Now, this is a red sparkling wine that is used as a very simple, wine, and sells over there for like $8 a bottle or €8 a bottle. And, you're talking about, a massive amount of work that goes into it. Sometimes, people are like, oh, why is your wine so expensive? Why is Napa Cab so expensive? Oh, the amount of work and all of this, whatever. No, it had nothing to do with that. With this wine, they go through so much painstaking labor to get that wine, and it's just enjoyed as a really inexpensive quaffer. But on top of that, they've really been experimenting and have had some great results with ripasso wines, still wines, meaning non-sparkling red wines. This particular wine is one that they do to really showcase the flavors of the varietal without the ripasso. So this does not have ripasso in it. It's funny. It surprises me a little bit because I feel like they use a little bit of ripasso, because it does have a little bit of that almost sort of pruny sort of ripasso sensibility to it, but it is very fresh. And again, this is their current vintage. So you're talking about, a wine that they hold back and say, okay, well, now it's ready to release. So it's a very, very unique grape variety. And again, I mean, the reason why I wanted to start with this one, because aromatic, it's very unique. And we talk about wines that have this really distinct black pepper to it. Like this is a very peppery, spicy, an interesting sort of savory red varietal. but it's definitely, it's not light, it's not vibrant, you know, it's not as when you talk about the aromatics, like we talked about, you know, the Lacrima and the Aleatico, it's not very floral. It's not, you know, high acid and just clean and crisp. This has some denseness to it. It has some richness to it. You can tell it's a fairly warm area. They ripen these grapes really, really, to its fullest. And this is sort of a clean expression of the grape variety Vernaccia Nera. So again, Vernaccia is kind of a catch-all name for a lot of grape varieties, and we talked about a couple times that over the years in Italy they've really narrowed down what these names are and scientifically. And our first wine that we tasted in this entire tasting was they used to call Vernaccia di Pergola. They used to think Aleatico and this grape variety were the same exact thing. And that's not the case. They're different grape varieties. Obviously, Aleatico was much more floral. It did have spice components to it, but a much brighter, high acid, thinner skinned grape variety. This is a thicker skinned grape. This is a much more substantive grape and a very, very different grape variety. And you know, on the west coast of Italy, you know, there's Grenache that was named Vernaccia at one point. There's a white grape variety in Tuscany called Vernaccia di San Gimignano, which is an entirely different grape. So Vernaccia was a catch-all name. And at this point, it's narrowed down to one of the last grapes still technically known as Vernaccia Nera is now this from the Marche. And it's this tiny little appellation that does red sparkling, but it's really fun to try this one little sort of, you know, pet project. Well, not pet project. This is sort of the family's favorite wine because it's just a straightforward example of what the grape variety tastes like. Any thoughts about this? Super unique. Obviously, real, you know, dense concentrated fruit. It finishes very, very clean, but spicy as can be.
If I'm blinding that, I mean, we talked about ripasso a lot, so it's a little bit of like plant the idea in the head.
I know that's true.
But there is so much of whether there's like that slight musty and dried fruit and that ripasso, not sugar, but I don't know. There's a little bit in here. They like showed it ripasso and we're like, we may make you this. Like they showed us dried grapes. Yeah. That's part of it. I don't know. It's there.
Exactly. It's just the fact that it was in the same cellar as the dried grapes is that it starts taking on that. I know. No, I agree. And it's funny, when I first had this wine, I've only first been exposed to this wine about 4 years ago, I would say. And at that point, I remember thinking, and I thought that I had read that it does have a little bit of ripasso wine in there. But now everything I read, and I unfortunately can't get 100% confirmation, because I agree. I feel like there's a little bit of ripasso in there, a little bit of that kind of sweet wine mixed in. It still finishes dry-ish, but it has that sort of raisiny character to it that I feel like there's got to be some sort of play of ripasso in there, and I'd be surprised if they don't. That being said, their website was built in 1702. There is
so they're up to date, actually. They're on top of it.
They're as old school as it can be. This family, their primary production again is this really, really convoluted sparkling red, and then they also, I think they probably make more money on their confections. So they make a lot of different confectionaries. The family's been there for a bit, and they're kind of the family of Serrapatrona. There are very few other producers besides the Quacquarinis. And they make, the classic, fruit cake out of these grapes. They make a lot of confectionery. So they have this sort of sweets factory, and then they also make wine. And so, their number one goal is not to actually tell you exactly what the wine's all about, because this is such small production of everything else that they do, that I haven't gotten the straight answer yet. But I agree with you. I whether it's mental or not, I do get that sort of sweet raisiny character on there, but it finishes nice and clean. So it's a really unique grape that way.
So Kevin, we're playing with food and wine over here. The chefs are like, just skip it, goat cheese, not at all. Salumi was good, but the briny Castello olives and this wine are just like, it sings. It's
oh, that's
crazy
cool.
Pairing.
That's actually
it's crazy pairing.
I could see this having. That's awesome.
Crazy pairing.
It's so good.
It balances the wine so beautifully. It's amazing.
Anybody else with olives?
If anybody has the olives, like.
Anybody have
please-
olives? Come on. Nobody
Come
else
on.
has olives in front of them?
Sorry.
That's too bad. No, but that's actually really interesting because, you know, with a wine like this, you never know what to do. And of course, with so many wines, you're like, oh, well, with this particular cheese and especially Pecorino in that area, you would think it goes well. But no, there's that denseness, there's that raisin, there's that very, very unique character to it that, you know, I could see it maybe fighting more pungent cheeses. So something as black olivey, which, you know, I would say, or I'm sorry, those Castelvetrano is not black at all, but this has a little bit of black olive component to it. This has that kind of sweet black olive nature to it, which I think actually was probably
stupid good. It's a happy accident pairing.
That's awesome. I love it.
Yeah.
Here's to stupid good happy accidents. I love it.
Right. Totally. Oh man. Cheers.
Anybody else have any thoughts of this wine? I know there's more opinions because this is a unique one.
I love the wine. I think it's worth talking about. I'd love to hear, again, call Alex out and his dad talking about the Amarone characteristics that are there. But I think it's worth note that the wine itself, like the complexity on the nose, from especially when you first open it and pour it, and the floral characteristics. There's like medicinal characteristics that are medicinal, pleasant way, like in a pleasant cough syrup and like pleasant for neck kind of tones, earthy, not earthy notes, but like, you know, herbal notes that are there that are mixed in with floral tones that you don't often see together that also have black fruit. And so it's a very unique thing in that regard. We're now kind of talking a little bit about the Brett on the finish and how it's just a little bit there, kind of like tightening it up. It's not stealing away too much, but we're just noticing it opening up a little bit as it goes on. But I noticed Alex was about to say something, so I'm going to push it over. But wait, Karen's going to add something real quick.
All I can say is I can't take my nose out of this glass.
Yeah, no, it is unique. It is definitely, you're right.
Wow.
Absolutely. No, again, because it is a lot of fresh ground pepper, but there is that harder character, but then there's that sweetness, right? Like and you know, again, because they're a confectionery producer, you know, like you can tell their palate is a much more on the sweet end of things is what they do. But boy, they just nail this sort of like mouth-watering sort of like intoxicating nose on there that is, you know, both herbal, savory, peppery, but then, you know, also has this sort of like sweetness that you just want to dig into. So I agree, it's hard to take your nose out of this one, which is why I wanted to have this before we had the next wine for sure.
There's definitely that sweet thing's like a sweet tobacco that's almost like bread, like that.
Sure, yeah, tobacco for sure.
Like Dunhill Mountain Cab, that's really nice. But I'm going to defer over to Alex because I know he was lined up.
What I felt, and when you said prunes, I'm going prunes, but no, I think maybe a slightly tart plum is what I was getting. Yeah. It wasn't prunes, but I understand the whole feeling about being it. I think about you know, a Reserva from the Veneto, and this is what I'm thinking. Yeah, it's not an Amarone, but there is that feel there. Yeah, I agree with that.
Right, more like a Valpolicella, definitely not as thick and sappy as an Amarone. You're absolutely right. So it does have that aspect, but you're right. Not prunes is not the right characteristic because we say pruny because all of a sudden that just evokes that sort of raisined fruit kind of characteristic, but it has plenty of acidity, plenty of freshness, which is why it's more like a plum. You're right, exactly, more like black plum.
Yeah, to echo you, Beth, I like the nose on this a lot. I mean, it really evokes kind of a Valpolicella Classico Superiore, which is a Ripasso-styled wine where it incorporates grapes that have gone through the appassimento process, which have been partially air-dried. And I mean, it kind of belays the 12.5% alcohol that's on the label. So
right,
you taste it, and you smell it and you think, okay, you know, it's got a lot of spice, it's got a lot of savory character. It could be in that ballpark, but then you taste it and it's got this kind of soft, expansive mouthfeel and maybe a touch of sweetness. I don't know, but it's super interesting. I like this wine a lot. And I agree. I think it incorporates some dried grapes in it for sure.
I think so too. I don't, you know, and again, I've known well enough to by now I know well enough to not necessarily trust what they say on their website. because either it's bad translation, which is sometimes the thing, or it's bad translation that has purposefully been done, which is they say, well, you can't actually say that because they don't want to hear that, so let's just change that. But I feel like, and I can't say with great authority that there has to be some sort of ripasso wine blended into this, and I think that's okay. I think I wish they would let us know that, but like I agree, I can't find any information that determines that, whether it's true or not, but it sure feels like it. But again, as you said, you can't tell. To me, it's not a wine like, oh, that's definitely got RS in the finish. I feel like I'm fairly sensitive to that. There might be a little bit, but it's minute. It's not a sweet red by any means, which sometimes Ripasso, Reservas, and Valpolicella can be, and this is not.
Yeah. Kevin, what do they harvest it late?
No, they harvest this. They harvest this at a regular ripeness, but then the majority of what they then harvest is what goes through their air dried system that they then put into it. And again, this is just a very small bottling of what they say this is the purity of what the grape tastes like. And then they have 2 reservas that are more like Amarone, and they are sweet and dense and clawing and quite interesting, but whew, they are big, stain your teeth wines. So this one is just, a lot more of their, and again, you talk to the producer, and this is what they think the expression of the grape varietal is. But then the other 2 are like they're Amarones, they're big boys, and they put a lot of that sweetness in there. So it's hard to determine, the difference. So. Does anybody not like this? Does anybody think that's like it's too raisiny? They don't dig this? Oh yeah, it's not for you guys? Oh, you guys are muted, sorry.
Stop talking about us.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
Oh, there you go. Now we can hear you.
Okay. Yeah, the finish isn't very long. It's just kind of ends right there. You drink it and that's it. It doesn't linger on your palate. So I knocked it for that.
And it was too medicinal smelling for me.
No, there's definitely there are those hard herbs, and that's not for everyone for sure. Like there is definitely, some of the, like Pedro's like Ferna Branca, right? Like, and when he and I say Ferna Branca, we're like, oh yeah, Ferna Branca. Like that's something that's like, we love those things, but I know if Ferna Branca is not something that a lot of people like or at all. So you smell those hard herbs, those medicinal herbs, and it's a turnoff right away.
Right.
So it is an interesting polarizing flavor component, especially when you get all this nice red rich fruit and then you throw those hard herbs in there. It can be disjointed for some people.
Exactly.
So,
yeah.
From my perspective, it's the difference between greater and greatest. I mean, really, we're tasting great wines.
yeah,
Just tremendous. And just like, how do we split these fine hairs? I mean,
we
had some boxes of wine here, that would be easier. But we got no boxes. We just got great Italian wine. So
I appreciate that. That's absolutely right. But there, so when you get to grape varieties, there are such outlier grape varieties like this and like Lacrima and like Aleatico. It really is. It's an interesting one, and you see, well, there's a lot of reasons why this grape variety isn't preferred, compared to like Sangiovese or Montepulciano, because of these sort of weird sort of notes. A lot of the times, these grapes aren't favored because they're difficult to grow. When we talked about that at length with the Lacrima de Bordalba, the only reason that grape isn't more planted in more areas is because it just won't actually survive in more areas. This grape variety is probably pretty hardy, but it's again, it lends well to this very unique savory component, and what else can you possibly do with this wine? Like, so it is interesting to try these things. They're very distinct flavors of Le Marche, which is what we're trying to accomplish here. But they're certainly singular in their components, that you won't taste anything like this in many other areas, and that's what makes it really, really fun.
They're not sure where the origins of this grape was, right? I think it's Spain or somewhere.
Well, yeah, that's where the Vernaccia conversation gets really, really confusing. Vernaccia in a general sense, most wine that was called Vernaccia in Italy, they brought back to the fact that they thought that, it was sort of a regular moniker for Grenache or Granaccia. So Granaccia from Spain is Grenache. Grenache, what we all know, mainly from the Rhone in France, was actually originally a Spanish grape variety. And then the Spanish owned Sardinia for a long time, and almost all the Sardinian local grape varieties and Corsica are all Spanish varieties originally. They just have different names. So in Sardinia, you have Cana now, which is their 100% their main red fruit, even though there's a couple other red grape varieties. But most of Sardinia is planted to, as far as red grapes, is Cana now, which is Grenache. And then when you get to the coastline, there was other grapes called Vernaccia, which was also Grenache. So Grenache was a very prolific grape, and it made its way throughout a lot of Italy. So that's probably where you're getting that information. This particular Vernaccia Nera is probably more closely related to whatever family of grapes on the East Coast, which is probably more related to Aleatico. Where they thought Aleatico was sort of a clone of Vernaccia. It's probably the opposite of that, where Aleatico is actually more of the parent that came off of perhaps Black Muscat, and then this grape. So the genealogy is amazing. It's literally an endless cycle of knowledge, just digging through and learning which grape is related to which. And Vernaccia definitely has very, very shady past of they don't know what it is. I think there's.
Isn't it like Zinfandel in California?
Well, no, Zinfandel, they've nailed down. They've really looked at it. It came over to us as Primitivo from Puglia, so south of Marche, all the way down the coast to the heel of the boot. It came to California as Primitivo from the Italian immigrants, but originally came to Puglia from the coast of Croatia. So they for a long time thought it was identical to Plavac Mali, but that's not necessarily the case. Plavac Mali was actually an offspring of the origin of what is Primitivo. Alex, you're gonna have to remind me the name of what's the original.
Tribidrag.
Tribidrag, yeah.
Tribidrag, they traced back.
Can't believe I didn't remember that one.
15th century, so it's been grown in Croatia for a long, long time.
Yeah, and now it's literally isolated to an island on the Dalmatian coast. I mean, so Tribidrag is very, very, very much isolated and small, where Plavac Mali became the more preferred sort of offspring of Tribidrag, and is grown quite prominently on that coastline, and that's what eventually sort of kind of they identified at first as being what Primitivo came from. But Tribidrag is actually what that is. Plavac Mali is the more popular grape on that coast of Croatia, and there's some great versions of Plavac Mali in Croatia. There's some amazing wines from there. Primitivo in Puglia is Puglia is very warm, very sandy soils. I mean, there are some big burly Primitivos. They grow the absolute heck out of it. There are thankfully some very small, minute examples of good Primitivo in Puglia, but the majority of the production, they make a very, very, very high volume of production. The majority of production either goes to very inexpensive, very, very rich high alcohol red wines. A lot of it was shipped off as a bulking varietal for other wines throughout Italy. It was demonized as the true problem in the big Montalcino scandal 10 years ago. 10 years, gosh, it was probably more than that. 12 years ago. Where Brunello de Montalcino was, a lot of the Brunellos were caught thickening up their yields every year with a lot of Primitivo, which was completely illegal. But it's a grape a very prolific grape that they can grow the heck out of there. And here as Zinfandel, it's become a very important and almost sort of homegrown variety in a way, is that Californians really stake their claim that Zinfandel is unique, as opposed to all of the classic Bordeaux and Burgundy varieties that we normally grow here. So it's got an interesting past, but it's probably these grapes, something like the Vernaccia, is probably related. I would say probably more related to the Negro Amaro grape variety than anything else. Negro Amaro tends to have this really interesting aromatics to it, even though in the South it gets a much bigger profile. So I don't know for sure. I know there's a lot of missing science there, but they're working on it. Sorry, we've gone down yet another nerdy rabbit hole. Any other questions about this?
Your family wants to talk.
Oh yes, Christine, would you like to talk? Go ahead. You can talk now. You're allowed. I don't know if they can figure it out. Nope, you're still muted.
Okay, sorry. I was going to ask if there's any drawings of these grapes.
Oh goodness, no, there is not a drawing of this grape because it is super small. We haven't gotten that far down the rabbit hole, but I will share the Verdicchio and the Montepulciano and the Sangiovese grape next when we drink the Montepulciano Sangiovese blend. I promise I'll show pictures.
You can mute us again.
Tell them to go forward.
Do you want to mute us?
You want to mute us.
Okay, we will mute you. Bye guys. Okay, before we move on to the next red, because we're going to go, obviously this is a little bit more of an exotic red, and we'll move on to a little bit more of a classic. Yeah, we're ready to move on. Okay, good. I'll go back to this map real quick just to show you. No, that's not it. Still not letting me get out of that. Sorry. There we go. That's the map that I wanted to get back to. To give you guys an idea, when it comes to red wines in Marche, because we talk about how it's broken up. The two, besides the outliers, like we were just talking about, the Vernaccia di Serra Petrona, this tiny little mountain town in the hills here, besides Lacrima d'Amor d'Alba, which, as we've discussed, there's, maybe a dozen producers. It's a very finicky grape. It's not the wine business that you get into in order to, make yourself wealthy. And, even worse so, Aleatico, tucked up in the hills here, very, very unique and very, very, sort of an outlier grape, to say the least. The main grape variety, of course, is Montepulciano, which we had the 100% Montepulciano from Conero, and this is their DOCG area, which is, super unique soils. But for the rest of Marche, you have a very large appellation called Rosso Piceno. And that's this whole red striped area right here. This whole area right here that covers a big swath of land, a lot of different terroirs, everything from the coast way up into the mountains. And it does touch on a lot of the same areas where they produce Verdicchio. So there's a lot of crossover with Rosso Piceno. But Rosso Piceno is almost always, although there are a few exceptions that are 100% Montepulciano, but Rosso Piceno is almost always a blend of Montepulciano and Sangiovese. And Sangiovese is the one grape variety that most of you would probably recognize. It's definitely the more well-known grape varieties out of Italy, obviously, for Brunello di Montalcino, Chianti. All the hundreds and thousands of Chiantis out there are Sangiovese, and Sangiovese grows quite well in Marche and has for a very, very long time, and it's an equally important grape to Montepulciano. In this case, the classic blend, sometimes it's 50-50. Classic blend is 60-40 Montepulciano to Sangiovese. And this is a really, really fabulous producer that I've just absolutely been enamored with for a long time, not only for his red wines, but also for his white wines as well. He makes, just absolutely some of the most, and we did talk about this very first week, he makes some of the most age-worthy Verdicchios out there. And he's got some really interesting techniques. But he's a biodynamic producer. He is, kind of a one-man show. Natalino is an amazing character. He's full of energy. He's got the loudest laugh I've ever heard in my life. You can be, you know, across the room in the middle of a tasting of 100 people, and you can hear Natalino laughing at the top of his lungs. He's an incredible character. He's a third generation farmer, and you know, he's one of the first people when I first started studying Italian wine, and when I first went over to the Marche, this was a long time ago. First time I've talked to somebody who, you know, explained, you know, because at that point, this was, you know, 15 years ago or so, you know, everybody was just now talking about biodynamics and, oh, well, is it a biodynamic wine? Is it a biodynamic wine? And in the sommelier world, we're all like, get excited about, oh, is it biodynamic? And you ask a guy like this, he's like, I guess, you know, this is how I've learned to farm. This is how my grandfather taught my dad, and this is how I learned to farm. And yeah, it's biodynamics. But he's never going to go out and get a biodynamic certification. He's never going to go out and say, oh, my wine's biodynamic. But everything he does is all about biodynamics. And biodynamics, in the shortest, easiest way to explain it, which is obviously much more complicated than this, it's solving your farming challenges through natural solutions. So if you have, you know, a certain bug, well, then you let your geese go through the vineyard and eat that bug. If you have certain, you know, challenges, if you have a rodent problem, then you know, allow owls to live in your vineyard. And so it's all about the opposite of monoculture, which is what you'll see in so many areas of viticultural areas where it's all grapes and that's all there is to it. His farm is completely biodiverse. He's got, you know, animals intermixing with his vineyards all the time, and they serve a very important purpose. In fact, he has a his white wine is called Vigna delle Oche, which is, you know, basically the vineyard of the geese. And specifically what keeps his vineyard healthy is the geese that literally, you know, they fertilize the soil, they eat the bugs, that, you know, it's all a symbiotic relationship. So all of his wines have an animal on it. And he also has a lot of rabbits, and, you know, he's these big, beautiful rabbits that are kind of roaming freely throughout his vineyard. It's a really fascinating example of sort of just free-for-all biodynamics, but without sort of like trying to stick within the rules of what biodynamics is. So different than the 100% Montepulciano, this definitely shows some character of Sangiovese. It shows a lot more kind of savory sort of potting soil and you know, sort of dried mushrooms, earthiness to it. But it does, you know, have a good fruit forwardness to it as well. There's tannins there. There's a good blend of what you expect out of both grapes, and it's just a really beautifully made wine. And 2016 was a great vintage in general for all of Italy, but especially Marche. They had some absolutely gorgeous wines for sure. Again, a very, very small production. This wine, it's not a light wine. We talked about the last one being 12.5%. You know, this is 14 on the label. It's not a light wine in any sense of the word, but it drinks cleaner than a lot of big burly Montepulcianos or some of the Montepulciano blends that from that area. I think it's a really, really nice classic example of this style of wine. Let me before we go into questions about the wine itself, we'll do one last look at photos, because this is a producer, as I've said, that I've visited a number of times. This is not know why I'm having such trouble today. I apologize on sharing the right screen. There we go. So this is the area just outside of this is the area of Monte Corato or Mount Carrot. And this is where his farm is, and that's Natalino there. There's me and Natalino at his farm. There's his geese. There's the Vigna delle Oche, just, you know, hanging out and making sure their vineyard is healthy. But again, really young, dynamic guy, you know, who is you know, does everything the way that his family has always taught him to, and he makes these really beautiful, dynamic wines. The one thing that he does very, very differently is this room right here. This is a picture of his secret cellar, as he calls it. And these are the tanks where he literally puts, if you see, it's a very, very low ceiling. I mean, obviously you can't even get into the caps there. If you can see, there's no room in this room. And the first time I saw this room well, you didn't really see the room. You can be in his cellar and realize that it's a really strange shaped cellar. There's, here's his fermentation area and all of his working area, and then here's his barrel room, but his barrel room wraps around in a circle, and then there's this obvious void in the middle of his cellar. And what he has done is create this sort of dark room where he houses these small stainless steel tanks. And in great vintages of Verdicchio, he will put his Verdicchio into one of those tanks and seal it up for 10 years minimum as a reserva. And he has tanks in there that are still in tank that are 25 years old, and they taste unbelievable. So his experimentation with aging Verdicchio is to the nth degree. It is
wait,
completely
Kevin,
extreme.
Kevin, how do we get those? Wait, hello?
I can get some, actually. He releases very little bottles to the importer. He prices it accordingly. I would say for Verdicchio, it's insanely expensive, and people are like, oh, that's just Verdicchio. But for those who know how good aged Verdicchio can be, his wines are stunning, and I would love to. We used to have them at Bergamot, and we always just had like a couple bottles sitting aside for those who wanted to try it. We always had those bottles there, and anybody who tried it was just like, what in the holy hell am I drinking? Because they are stunning. So yes, I will get some. It's been actually a couple of vintages since I've had one. So you guys are definitely inspiring me to go out and get more.
We're in. Yeah.
Cool.
We're like, you got us there.
Cool. It's stunning stuff. And just the first time I saw that, actually the first time we saw that, I was with Mick Unti, and I've never seen that man's jaw hit the floor as quickly as it did. He's like, wait a minute. How many tanks do you have in this tiny little black room that literally the only way in there is like there's you have to go behind another tank and then go down this little ladder, and then you're in this dark room where there's no headroom, there's no headspace, there's nothing to do other than pump these wines in and let them sleep in complete darkness and temperature control, and he just lets them go, and he just seals them up, and they just sit, and it's just unbelievable. I've never seen anything like it.
That's insane.
Yeah, it is. It's ridiculous. But he's
Is
like,
there any SO2 management that goes on for the decades that they're in there?
nope, absolutely not.
No.
He seals it and lets it sit.
Wow.
I know, it's crazy. It's really, really unique. So these wines are oxidized, but not like purposely oxidized like an orange wine, right? But they still hold together with such complexity, such freshness, such acidity. He keeps them as in a non-oxygen environment as much as he can. But at the end of the day, these wines are still going to mature and mature and mature and mature. And then he'll bottle them again. I'll have to look up, and I'll see as we're talking if I can find what their current vintage is of that wine, and I'll let you know. But it's insane stuff. It's really worth seeking out.
No, we are so in.
Yeah. I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised that room is like, oh yeah, give me.
Yeah, we're fighting.
Exactly.
Perfect. So now that I've gushed about his white wines, his red wines are also equally as delicious. He does make some Lacrima, but again, most of his production and his Lacrima, he farms a small little biodynamic vineyard, actually in Mordalba, but his vineyards are right on a river, and he uses his red wines more in the riverbed area. And Montepulciano, Sangiovese, really beautiful classic blend. And sort of, to me, a really just perfectly put together grape that's very, very similar or very, very typical of the area, but a really great example. It's got that sort of leathery component to it. It's got sort of slight cocoa powder tannins. I think there's some really, really nice cinnamon to this wine, but at the end of the day, dark red cherries, dark red fruit, and a really beautifully balanced wine. A little bit more rustic, not as polished, and obviously doesn't see the oak that the Conero, the Le Terrazze Sassineri that we had. This is definitely a little bit more rustic, a little bit more classic, and not as polished. But I, depending on your palate, I tend to lean towards this a little bit more.
I mean, Kevin, from my point of view, like this is for the Marche. This is incredibly polished. Like a lot of their reds are kind of have some rough edges. They have a lot of heat, a lot of kind of funky components.
Super fun, I think, is what you need.
No doubt.
Right. That's what.
Yes, they can get funky for sure. That's.
Yeah.
And again, These are red wines from white wine makers. Like, so.
Exactly. And it shows. And this one is a nice version of that for sure. Like it is a little hot, and in some ways the Sassignette was like a little more polished, as you said. But this is, it's
Pretty though. Lovely.
It's really good with food. Like I want a big steak. You know, it's
this goes to our old thing. You know, like this is where you want a nice, side of boar, right? Like, because this is where there's a lot of woodsy areas, and back to our theme. I never even mentioned that today, but yeah, this is where wild boar is like that's what's on the menu in Jesi, and whether it's cured and thinly sliced, or whether you're eating boar cheeks for dinner, it's like this is the kind of wine that you're gonna want with that for sure. So.
Like a boar sugo.
Oh yeah, totally. This is the wine for that for sure. Which again, that's a little bit more my palate, than some of the more polished, oak driven wines. But it depends on what you like. I think this is a really great example of that. But not everybody, this is their thing. Any other thoughts on this?
Right now, like we're splitting. Like we this one, like Steve and I won't surprise you love this because we're close to your palate. And yeah, it's good. It's good. It has a certain, I like the edges. That's all.
I'm loving it.
Yeah, I like it as well. Again, but it is, it's rustic and earthy. Again, that real mushroom, that mushroomy, turned potting soil kind of thing. I love that kind of stuff, but it's not for everybody.
No.
I'm looking at the importer's book right now, and there is no Il San Lorenzo available, but I will inquire and see when we can get our hands on it. But currently it's not there, so we will get in line for our allocation, and we will get some, because Alex, did you ever try that at Bergamot?
Yeah, I feel like I've loved every wine I've had from this producer, and this red wine is no exception too. The Verdicchios are just tremendous. And I thought they went into concrete tank to age for a decade, or he had some concrete that he used for that sort of thing with the whites. Is it all stainless?
It's all stainless. Yeah, no, it's all stainless. And the reason why is because, again, the oxygen exchange, because his minimum is 10 years and then I won't touch it. He can actually seal that up with the concrete. It would be too much. It would go way too oxidative. So for him, because he actually did have a lot of, when we talk about concrete tanks, there's a lot of the old wineries in Italy have these walls and walls of concrete tanks built into the wall. That's what they do. He actually tore out his old cellar's concrete tanks, and that's he described how he made that room. That's where the concrete tanks used to be, and then I sealed it all off. I put these tanks in there, and I then pump it into the stainless, because that actually it will hold them better. The concrete, it's a funny one, because you're right. When you start getting winery technical with stainless, you worry about temperature control, but the way he temperature controls it is literally keeping it in stainless but blocking it off in its own room that doesn't change temperature and never gets any light in it. So it's this very, very funny style, and he's such a quirky guy that you're like, wait a minute, how many tanks do you have in there? There was, there's like 10 tanks crammed in this room with no room to work on or work around, and no headspace. As you see, it's all about like, okay, well, these are locked in there. And, the first time he went in, he crawls in this little dungeon, and he comes out, he's got his headlamp on, and he crawls in, he comes out with a glass of wine, and he goes, yo, here's, 15-year-old Verdicchio. You're like, where the heck did that come from? And what, are you kidding me? Like, that's insane. So he's a unique cat. And again, I love his white wines to death. It was fun to throw his red wine in here. It's the first time in our Marche Madness, 7 years, that we haven't had one of his white wines in there, instead showcasing his red wine. So I thought that was kind of fun.
Yeah, this is such a textbook Rosso Piceno. I mean, to me, the Montepulciano really asserts itself. It's got that sort of Rococo character and that black currant or cassis, with a little bit of lift of like dark cherry or dried cherry, almost from the Sangiovese.
Right.
But to me, the tannin profile on this wine is just the hallmark, where it's strong, but it's a plush tannin, and that's how the tannins on Montepulciano are. I mean, you associate with that that skin of Montepulciano, and that's just how the tannins feel. I appreciate that there's not new oak on there, kind of, you know, confusing the mix of that tannin profile. I like to taste that kind of a little bit more raw tannin element from the Montepulciano.
Yeah, he does. He only does one wine where he messes around with new oak and does a very modern wine, and it is, you know, it's not for me. I've never had it with any age to it. Every time I've tasted that wine, it's way too young. It's tannic as fuck, and it's just like it gets way overwhelming. So it's I'm sure that it's beautiful, but I think it needs 20 years. I mean, it's not as immediately enjoyable, and I think, you know, because he knows Marco from Oasis di Angeli, della Angeli, you know, the Kearney. He knows him, and he knows that style of like super extracted Montepulciano, and he does that. But Kearney gets away with that really, really super high alcohol and very exotic version of Montepulciano, where his
on of Montepulciano.
Yes, it is definitely. He's definitely the sine qua non of Montepulciano, the sine qua nons of the entire coastline of Italy. But I
Kevin?
think, yeah.
I find tasting these side by side, I need to flip a coin for my brackets.
Yes, these are very different
I am
wines.
sitting here going, okay, frankly, I really like the other, but this has got that leathery, almost a kid glove feel to it. Yeah. Diane, you'll understand what I mean about leather, right? Anyway, so thank you. I have to leave. I have a dog that is having a problem right now, and this has been wonderful.
Thank you so much.
Ciao.
It was really good to see you. I can't wait to see your brackets.
Oh, they will be there.
It's a real treat. I will see you soon, Beth.
Bye.
Take care. No, that she brings up a very good point. These two red wines are, I think, out of all the, I mean, no matter what, each bracket has, when we go back to the bracket part of it, each bracket has their own challenges. I mean, the Verdicchios we tried last week are very distinct from one another, very, very different, but they're still Verdicchio. And the first round, when we did the two coastal whites, they were very unique. The Albanella versus the Biancolella, very, very unique wines. Those are probably more similar to this in that they're so unique. They're such unique wines, and they're both great on their own terms. It's hard, to compare them both. So it's it's going to be interesting. I can't wait to see what you guys have to say between this, because there's the classicness of the San Lorenzo, there's the Quacquerini Sterpatrona, which is such a, you know, outlier of a wine. It's hard to compare them and say, do I like one better than the other? Maybe some of you have said, oh, it's easy, but to me, it's not so easy, you know, whether or not I like one over the other. And it's been interesting so far in the brackets that I've seen, what people say. So I look forward to, does anybody feel like they're just I mean, I know a couple of people don't like that first wine. Anybody else sort of thoughts on the comparison between the two?
I find the like nose on them to be very different, but the taste isn't that different.
Okay. Yeah.
Like the first one's super sweet. Like when you smell it, you're like, wow, this is like, it's like very California Zinfandel smelling.
Sure.
Again,
sure.
I hate talking on this because I'm like, everyone knows so much.
No.
Very layman's terms here, but I smell like California Zinfandel when I smell.
No, that's accurate. That's accurate for sure. It's got that spice characteristic.
But then tasting it was like, oh, it's not super sweet. It's not like, it doesn't have that like icky bite to it. Sorry.
Right.
And this one is like super earthy in the smell.
Yeah.
Totally different nose, but the taste kind of similar. I wouldn't.
I see what you mean. Absolutely. Because actually, and that's a good point. When we compare like last week, when we had those two whites, they were the same grape varietal, but weight wise in your mouth, they did entirely different things. Yeah. In this, both of these red wines are very, very down the center. Right. Okay. They're not huge. They're not like the 100% Montepulciano. They're not super floral like the Lacrima, where even though the Serra Patrona nose gives off all those really floral, spicy notes. The finish is very, red fruit and very straightforward. So you're right. It's kind of like both these wines start, on opposite ends, and then they kind of end up right in the same spot. Where the white wines from last week that were very similar, they kind of started off on different sides and they ended up on different sides. They were 100% different from start to finish. Where this one actually, I can see what you mean. They start in different spots, but they do end up very similar. They're mid-weight. They both have similar acidity. They both have, well, one's more like herbal components, the other one's more earthy components, but that's splitting hairs, right? Where this is, I do agree that they're very, very medium plus body. They have similar acid profiles. They have similar tertiary notes. So I could totally see what you're talking about there for sure. They're not that dissimilar, and that actually makes them even more difficult to discern on which one you like better. So
and they're also both delicious.
Well, that's good. I'm glad. Are you guys eating something that it's working with, or?
No, we ate. It's 10 o'clock here.
Come on, what is that?
We're done eating. We're done with the eating.
You guys are New Yorkers. Come on, like it means you're just starting dinner, right? Not like you have kids or anything that's going to wake you up 5 a.m, right?
No, we don't have those anymore, thank God.
Although they're still awake at 5 a.m. That's the problem.
They are, right? Exactly. That's awesome.
They're delicious, and I love broadening our horizons. So thank you.
No, of course, my pleasure. Do you? Let me ask you, now that we're still talking about it, do you feel like you liked the third one in this bracket any better? Did you like the Montepulciano? Did that stand out, or do you have a standout between the three of these?
No. I mean, I really liked the first one, but I think I like as far as the whites go, I definitely think the first white from last time is my favorite.
Okay.
Those three. And then these two, it's hard. It's really hard for me to pick. I'm actually going to do like a side-by-side tasting when this is all done, because I really can't decide. They're different, but I like them both.
Okay, cool. No, that's it. That's actually, I guess, the next subject of conversation is we can talk about our brackets. And again, just know, as you said, Leanna, there's don't be afraid to speak up, because there are some people in this room that know way too much, and there's a lot of people who don't. So that's the whole fun thing about talking about wine. It's like, we can all still have the same conversation about whether or not we like it, no matter what. Wine is subjective, right? And at the end of the day, the whole idea of these brackets is as fun a format as it is. There is no such thing as a wrong answer. It's just what you like, because they're all great wines. It's interesting at this point to start talking about, like, as we put the pieces together, do these wines on drinking these a separate week than prior, do they stand out as better or worse? And is there anything that is there anybody who just, like, at this point, I know what my bracket is, I know what my winning wine is, and that's it? Does anybody just have a clear winner in their head? I'd love to hear that. Anybody have a clear winner? Nobody yet. All right. Fair enough. That's okay. Nobody's willing to put their hammer prediction down on what the winner is. I'll tell you guys
winner, because there's a white winner and a red winner.
No,
Like,
sure.
there's no winner? I mean, come on.
if you want to share, that's fine. Yeah.
No, we're not there yet. Just you're jumping ahead. Like, we're still in white versus red over here.
I know.
Got MVP way more times than he has. Wait, what are you talking about?
Michael Jordan rocks. Okay, like, come on.
There you go.
Sports team.
I will.
UCLA is my dark horse.
That's it. That's a good dark horse to have.
Oh, UConn in the women's.
Yeah, well, that's not a dark horse.
That's never a dark horse.
Arizona's your dark horse for women.
It's Final Four. It's the dark horse.
Yeah. Arizona dark horse women's.
You should probably mute us.
Right.
You stop.
So, this is ours right here.
What's
Like
that?
2 championship seeds add to 15.
We can't see it. What is it?
Conero.
The Conero. Oh, that was your winner out of all of them.
Yeah.
All right, cool.
4
Understandable, and that one of the most celebrated wines from the Marche. I mean, Antonio is by far one of the most important red producers in the entire region, without question. That makes a lot of sense. That's a great wine for sure.
So, asked and answered.
There you go. That's it. Perfect.
Kevin, I think that Lacrima from last week was mind-blowing. I think that could be.
Oh yeah, the Orgiolo.
That was just. I mean, that just blew out every single wine. I mean, all of them have been absolutely. It's been an incredible experience trying to all these wines and the experience of understanding of where they're from. I mean, I'm a complete novice, obviously. Melissa's the big nerd, and she's not even here. But
she's the one who drinks the wine beforehand. Come on.
The one who drinks the wine beforehand. Yeah, exactly. And then we kind of find anything similar, which is impossible to find here in Nashville. Yeah, I mean, the first Lacrima that we had in that first week was incredible, and then that one last week was pretty mind-blowing. I think everyone can probably agree how amazing that wine was last week. So.
Yeah, well, I would say that you and Melissa are definitely guilty of being friends with me for too long, and you've drank
exactly.
more Lacrima than most people, just because I'm addicted to that stuff, and it's the one grape that I
I knew you got the Lacrima smuggler. Yeah, exactly.
Exactly.
Pirate of Lacrima.
But that's actually an interesting one. I wonder, because hearing from some of you, I've gotten a lot of emails from you guys. Hearing from some of you, how excited you were about Luigi Giusti Lacrima versus the Marotti Campi, because Marotti Campi has the oak influence to it, and so there's going to be some interesting differences between. They're both amazing wines, and they're both such unique. It's such a unique grape variety, but both unique expressions of that grape.
Well, Kevin, what's really interesting about the first Lacrima in the first week is that one of our friends that was here, he's not really a big wine person, he's a very big cocktail person. He drank that and he was just like, I could drink this every day. Because it's one of those things that you can't really drink the whole bottle. I feel like it's one of those things that it's good to share, but it's just the first one anyway. I could so interesting as someone who's really, you could drink anything. But it's interesting coming from someone who loves cocktails, and it's so interesting when someone who's a big cocktail person, you could see that, right? And then you could kind of like, oh yeah, I get that. I get the kind of like, the vibe of cocktails that you kind of like from that fruit. It's super interesting, I think.
Well, no, that's actually a really good point. I mean, that's what we kind of brought up today with with this one with the Serra Petrona, is that the fun thing about so many of these Italian grape varieties is that they delve into flavor profiles that we're not 100% accustomed to in our American palates, right? We're used to dark fruit, we're used to oak, we're used to the vanilla flavor of oak, we're used to this very, very specific profile. And the coolest thing about Italian wine, and what also makes Italian wine so bloody confusing, is that you have these grapes that just taste entirely different, and they span this flavor profile that's entirely different, like bitter herbs, like Ferna Branca, like like citrus rinds, like the Lacrima is like a very much it tastes like Earl Grey tea. It's that bergamot, and you think of the modern cocktail experiences, they're using all these crazy ingredients, and most of them are balancing sweets with bitters. And it's all these bitter flavors and these really, really exotic notes that make the modern cocktail world really, really interesting. And that's why these wines are interesting, because they have those innate components inside the grape variety that when they're expressed in a nice well-made wine, that's what comes out. And that's not what's common to our normal everyday wine that we get at Trader Joe's. And that's okay. Nothing wrong with those wines. It's just that these are just dynamic in a way that they explore a much wider spectrum of your taste portfolio of whether you like it or not. It's gonna challenge you and say, oh wow, that really is black peppery. I've heard people say peppery, but that actually smells like ground black pepper, or that does smell like rose petals, or that does smell like all these cool flavor components and these aromatics and these botanicals that are very different than what we're accustomed to in wine in general in the US. And that's why I love Italian wine so much, and that's why these grape varieties stand out so much, is because of those botanical flavors.
Right. And I think what's so amazing what you're doing with this whole experience for this last week is this experience. Someone like that would probably never go and buy that bottle of wine, right? Or even understand what it is, completely ignore it. Now that person would probably seek out that wine, right? Because it's something that they love, and it's just kind of changed someone in a way, I suppose, for their.
No, I agree, and that's my goal. That's always been my goal, is
changing the world one Lacrima at a time.
Absolutely. the goal is that like you're no longer afraid of something that is the unknown, right? Is like you try something different, because Italian wine is absolutely insanely confusing. You know, we
you have like cards that you're gonna make out of grapes, like 52.
We haven't done the cards yet. Damn it. You're right. Now we have to switch. All right. Good segue. Good job, Craig.
No, and Kevin, you've got to be the Joker, dude. On a unicycle, you come on, man.
The Joker on a unicycle? What are you talking about?
Well, like they usually have the unicycle.
How did I get there?
You're gonna be the guy on the unicycle in the card deck. Like it's got to be you in there.
Oh, okay. All right. I like it. Yeah. Oh, I get to be the Joker in the deck. I get it.
Yeah, and like a bicycle deck, you might be on the unicycle. You would be the Joker on the unicycle. Sorry, and the bicycle deck cards, so to speak.
I like it. I like it. That's a really good idea.
And I'm glad someone brought up the cards to reinstate my.
We're back, my sister will always tell me it's time to bring up the cards. Thank you, Christine. So here's Verdicchio. We went over this last week. We definitely need to augment Verdicchio. I think she's great, but she needs a belt buckle that says Metallica, and it needs to have spikes in it. But the whole idea of Verdicchio is that she's all about the balance between mountains and sea, which is her, disco mermaid pants. That's one. It's one that we love, but we need to work on a little bit, I think. But the other ones that we covered today are important ones. This one, of course, I don't think we've looked at this one yet. This is Sangiovese. And Sangiovese is a funny one because it is obviously the most important grape in Italy, one of the most important red grapes. Sangiovese is a little bit of a chameleon in a lot of ways. It covers a lot of different flavors, from hazelnut to tomato to cherry to plum. The whole idea is that it's a little bit of an artist that can be, kind of change its grounds at any point, depending on where it's grown. There's the little nod to Jupiter there, the blood of Jupiter, which is the root of the name. But it's a really there's so much Sangiovese that I love, and there's unfortunately a lot of people know Sangiovese as just like your regular Chianti, and there's a lot of Sangiovese that comes out of Italy that maybe is not so interesting, but at the end of the day, there's a reason why it's so regal. It is an incredible grape variety, and it is a chameleon, and it shows a lot of different it shows a wide palette of different flavors, and so we were really excited. We were happy with the way that one came out. And then the last one that we did tonight was the Montepulciano, which I know we've shown you guys before. And you guys, it's been really fun doing this, because you guys have definitely inspired us to get on the ball to make a book out of these grape varieties for sure. So I appreciate it. It's been a really funny conversation between Sarah and I of reviving the grape characters. But this is Montepulciano. As we've talked about, a bigger grape variety, a little bit of a husky grape variety that is a workhorse because they grow the heck out of it, but it has a lot of character as well. It's got a lot of herbal character, which is that shown by the herbs in his backpack. A little bit of that cocoa tannins, which is exactly what you just said, Alex, when we were talking about the wine. A little bit of that kind of baked plum pie. He's got a plum on his finger, and it's a really dynamic grape variety. And it's a grape variety that all of you who follow California wines, you're going to see a lot more of this grape variety in California real soon, because it's very prolific. It goes super, super well here. It is a wine that's really going to suit our climate here very, very well, and you'll see it planted here a lot more in the near future, and I'm really excited about that, because I think that the potential is great for it here in California for sure, as I do for a lot of these grape varieties. Maybe not Lacrima de Morto Alba, because that grape variety is just really difficult. We've tried it here. There might be a few brave souls who do it, but something like Montepulciano that grows well and makes a really, really dynamic and fantastic wine, it makes so much sense here in California. Sangiovese does well here, even though there's not a ton of it. There's quite a few people who are working with Sangiovese. Verdicchio remains to be seen. It's been planted here before. They're experimenting with it. I think it could do well in California, but right now Verdicchio is just coming into its own in Italy in and of itself. And Italian wines or Italian wine lovers are a little bit more enamored with white wine. And California wine lovers, they're very, very stuck on one specific style of wine, but that's changing. The big buttery Chardonnays are finally falling out of favor, and we're starting to expand our palates here in California. So that makes me very happy as well. Any other thoughts about these wines, or any other questions about the brackets before you go and convene and get in your dark room and decide what is the final winner or anything like that? Are there any other questions? Actually, I had forgot I had promised that I would share both Ian D'Agata his brackets. I'll share that with you.
This was untasted, right?
He has tasted all of these wines, meaning that I didn't send him these wines and he didn't go through them, but he's tasted all these wines. So yes, correct. He knows the wines one way or another. He said he went back to his notes. He is a fastidious note taker. The man is a legend. So at no point do I think he kind of guessed at anything. I also got a bracket filled out by my dear friend and colleague Shelley Lindgren from A16, who knows these wines also intimately well. And she may not have looked at her notes or whatever, but like me, you taste these wines and you put them in your Rolodex and you know them. So it was interesting. They had some similarities, the two of them, but some differences. And again, at the end of the day, do not let their picks sway your decisions, because it doesn't matter what anybody else says. It just depends on who else, at the end of the day, we'll see who likes what. And a lot of you have been in this tasting every week, but there's some other people who've been tasting and watching this remotely, so we don't know what their opinions are going to be. So no matter what, it's going to be subjective. It's going to be all about what you like about the wine and how you like the wine. So don't let these pros opinions, if you will, sway your decisions. But let me pull them up real quick.
Hey, Kevin, the two DOCG wines are my favorite, white and red.
Oh, they are. Okay, so you're going with the classics. I love it.
Before I knew they were DOCGs, though.
There you go. Okay, there you go. No, that's interesting, right? Like you've learned that they're those are the ones that you prefer. They're the polished, and they sort of live up to their expectations, which is fine. That makes sense.
Yeah.
This is
so Kevin, I have a knock joke for your son.
Okay, he's okay. Do I need to get him here?
No, you can teach it to him.
Okay, good.
And it's appropriate. Knock,
Good
knock.
job. Who's there?
Olive.
Olive who?
I love you and I love wine.
Oh, I love it. Perfect. Thank you very much. I love it. That's awesome.
You tell Kevin that.
That will definitely, he is into knock knock jokes, by the way. He's reading his first knock knock joke book and he absolutely adores it. So this is Shelley's brackets. She forgot to fill in the
Not sharing.
What's that?
Not sharing it.
It's not showing? Let me try again. How about now? Visual? Okay. She forgot. Great. She forgot to fill in the secondary ones, these ones here. Make sure you fill in those. Those are super important. But I went back and asked her, and her decisions were on this one. She chose the La Distesa over the Colle Stefano, and then she went the Andrea Felici. In this one, she went with the Claudio Morelli, and then obviously Morelli made it to the semifinals. In this one, the Quacquarini obviously made it through. And in this one, let me see, the Luigi Giusti went to here, and then the Marotti Campi beat the Luigi Giusti, and the Marotti Campi got to the semifinals, and Andrea Felici won it all for her. which is awesome. I mean, I know she's a big lover of Verdicchio, but you know, I never know. She and I have worked together for, at this point, you know, over 15 years. I adore her and respect her opinion in every way. But also, you know, we've got similarities and differences with our palates, and it was really fun to see what she chose. And then the next one would be to pull up Ian's. And I'm not going to share mine yet with you guys. Mine's going to be secret. But here's Ian's.
Ask him right now.
Hey, Kevin.
Yep.
So once we fill out all of our brackets and have our winners, is there an opportunity for us to get together and talk about, you know, what the end result was?
We could definitely do that. I could schedule another meeting if there's enough people interested in talking about what they think. By all means, I'm all for it. I'll throw it out there. It seems like a few of you are into it. It's worth just talking about, and you know, let's open up something else. Like, I'm all for.
I feel like we spent 4 weeks together going through all of this, and it's been amazing and really interesting. And I've learned a lot myself, and I know everybody else here has, and I'm sure everybody else that's joining in. And it'd be really great to learn what the end result was, what everybody liked, you know, and what the different, you know, talk about, you know. We ended up on this versus we ended up on that, and
you got a sports center it, man. You got the ref thing on. It's March Madness. Recap, bro. Come on. There's always an end. They got a recap at the end, right?
You know, Renee, another reason to get on Zoom and drink with you guys, I am all for. So no problem. Yeah, I will schedule it, and let's, you know, if you guys are up for showing up, I would love to do it. And what I'll do is I'll invite everybody to bring a different bottle of Italian wine that they might have access to, and everybody bring a different bottle of wine to that conversation. We'll talk about the Marche Madness wines, and then everybody, if you have a question about a wine, or if you want to go get a wine that you just, you know, pick, you know, randomly, and I'll be happy to tell you all about it, then let's do it that way. Let's make it more of a show and tell. We'll go more like, you know, Felix's kindergarten style, where let's all come to the table, we'll talk about what we liked about the last wines, and we'll go through it, and then everybody bring a bottle of wine to the table. Let's talk about what it is, and I'll see if I can shed some light on what that wine is, and we'll do it that way. So that sounds great. I'm all for it. That sounds awesome. I love that idea.
Yeah, we would love to do that. So we're in for sure if you want to put that together.
And hey, and before we mute back up, can we all pour a little glass, and let's give Kevin a little cheers for doing an amazing job on this, and totally guiding us through this and making it educational and fun, and giving us a reason to get together for 4 weeks in a row and have a lot of fun. This has been awesome, Kevin. Thank you for you know, making some magic happen in times that are a little difficult for a lot of people. And this is awesome. I mean, I hope we like. And where are we going to go next? Let's go north.
That's right.
Let's go north for the next one, and let's do an exploration up north. But cheers to you first. Here you go.
Cheers.
Thank you very much. Cheers, guys. Really appreciate it. This has been really fun, and yeah, we're definitely I've got a number of ideas for what's next in this format. This was the first time we did. You know, I'm doing a lot of Zoom tastings. We're doing private tastings. We're doing our public ones, and it's been a really fun way to do this. But you know, as far as a multiple week at a time, this is the first time that we've ever done this, and it's definitely an experiment, and so far it's been absolutely fantastic. So we'll look forward to what the next one is for sure, and I appreciate it. Thank you guys, and I love your idea, Renee. We're going to throw it out there, and you know, only if only a couple of you join, it's going to be a blast no matter what. So but we'd love to see all your faces, and appreciate your support in in joining something as crazy as this, as the Marche Madness, and being willing to try some wines that are just so out there and so unique and learning about. So I really appreciate it. So cheers to you guys as well. Salud.
Hey Kevin, the sort of maybe penultimate besides winning thing to do in Marche Madness / March Madness is hit a buzzer beater. So will you do your best buzzer beater? I just won the game face for us.
I don't know if I could do that. That's a little.
You just got to do a swish, and then like you just crushed it.
You know that'll be at the very end. I'll be ready for the recording at the very end. I'm going to work on that internally, and my internal acting skills are starting to work.
I didn't know this was going to be so difficult. I'm so sorry.
No. I just know that like when we do it, I have to stop the recording right at that moment. I can't just do it and then we go back into conversation. That's not fun. That's awkward. That's super awkward.
It's Breakfast Club.
Right. Exactly. So it's all about ending the moment at that moment. So can you guys see the screen? This is Ian's. Just so I get through it. This is Ian's choices.
No. Let's take a look.
Asla Campi.
Yeah, he went with Moratti Campi. I know he's a big Moratti Campi fan. He just did I mean, if you don't know Ian D'Agata, some of us obviously are really excited to see what Ian has to say. Ian is sort of one of the most foremost, without question, the foremost authority on Italian grape varieties. I've learned a ton from Ian over the years. He has been the one to really do the research on genetically separating what we know about Italian grape varieties and about the producers. And he's just an all around one of the nicest guys ever. And I feel lucky to have gotten to know him. But his knowledge is second to none, and he was really tickled that I sent this to him, and he thinks that he's one of those people who is such a big fan of the Marche wines, just as I am. He's actually coming out with an article. He's an incredible wine writer, a very successful wine writer, and he's coming out with an article in, he said, 3 weeks, specifically about Marche wines, and I will email it to all of you. I'll email you guys the link, because anything that he writes up is so super in depth and incredible. So he was tickled to be a part of this, and he sent it back to me like almost instantly, and he had some really clever things to say. He had actually I'll have to read it to you right now. Actually, this is really quite funny, especially because you brought up the buzzer beaters. What did he write back? He wrote back, he said, had you the Felici Flying Falcons in any other bracket, they would have been a finalist. But in the last second buzzer beater in the game with the Colle Stefano Coyotes, they forced a huge upset out of the game and missing out on the big final. So, you know, he was totally into it. He thought it was hysterical. So I love that to be able to include someone like that who is just such a huge peer and someone who I look up to greatly to see this, you know, ludicrous little event as something special for him. So I appreciate that. And I appreciate you guys all for joining us and for listening to our banter and for, you know, enjoying some really unique and delicious wines and exposing yourself to an area in Italy that I think is just absolutely underserved and super important. And I highly recommend all of you, you know, learn a little bit more about and go and visit when we do have the opportunity to visit, because these producers are, you know, world class, and they're also people who just aren't used to people coming and knowing their wines very well. So you go and visit them, and the red carpet is rolled out and in Italian style, and they're very humble, and they're very excited about showing you what the Marche is all about, and the tastes and flavors and the style of the region is all about. So moments like this just make me very proud to sort of spread the word a little bit. So thank you again. I look forward to whatever our next meeting is. I love that this isn't our next meeting. Thank you, Renee. You're absolutely right. We should have a follow-up, and we will do so. And everybody bring your own Italian wine, BYO Italian wine, to the next one, and we'll see what you bring. And I'd love to just, you know, talk blindly of it and just make it, you know, an unprepared conversation, but also to talk about what people liked and go back on what we've just experienced. So
and what region we're going to go to next for our next comprehensive 3-week study.
That's a really interesting one. There's a couple things on the table. You'll find out via email. There's a couple different ideas on the table.
Sicily.
Mount Etna is exploding.
Sicily.
Mount Etna is definitely exploding, and
Australia. South.
Dorlease has G.
Dorlease has G.
I'm muting him.
What's that? Friuli, yeah, that would be a good one too, for sure. Friuli and Sicily can definitely be like they can handle a whole month's worth of tasting. I mean, most regions can, but those two would be high on my list for sure, for sure. But yeah, let's do it. Let's go region by region and month at a time. I love this sort of on-demand education, and I'm glad you guys do too. This is a fun experiment, and we will definitely be expanding it from here on. So I so appreciate the support for sure. Awesome, everybody. We'll talk to you soon. I look forward to brackets. It's really going to be a blast. Cheers to all of you. We love you so much, and we'll get to see you soon. And yeah, fill out those brackets. I'm just so excited because there's so many questions, because I sit here and analyze, which one's going to win, here, and which one's going to win here based on your conversation. But at the end of the day, I don't know anything. So cheers, guys. Much love.